Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our regular council meeting for Monday, September 25th, 2023. I'll call the meeting to order at 5 p.m. First item on the agenda, under agenda item 1.1, Land Acknowledgement. The town of Coaldale acknowledges that we are gathered on the lands of the Blackfoot peoples of the Canadian Plains and pays respect to the Blackfoot peoples past, present, and future, while recognizing their cultural heritage, beliefs, and relationship to the land. The town of Coaldale is also home to the Métis Nation of Alberta, Region 3. Next item on the agenda, under agenda item 1.2, Conflict of Interest Declaration, Pecuniary and Non-pecuniary. Are there any in the room this afternoon? Councillor Sailer.
I have a conflict of interest and would like to recuse myself from item 13.3.
Thank you. Are there any others? None declared. Thank you. Moving on to acceptance of the agenda under agenda item 2.1, the regular council meeting agenda for September 25th, 2023. Are there any additions or omissions to the agenda? I have one under agenda item 12.1. Under information, we have a letter, a unified letter of support from the regional MLAs regarding the Coaldale Tabor ACP grant application, and we'll be speaking regarding those subject matters under agenda items 8.2 and 8.3. Are there any other additions? Seeing none, could I get someone to make a motion that council adopt the regular council meeting agenda for September 25th, 2023 as amended? Councillor Pickering, any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. Thank you. Moving on to agenda item 3.1, the regular council meeting minutes from September the 11th, 2023. Were there any errors or omissions in the minutes? Seeing none, could I get someone to make a motion that council adopt the regular council meeting minutes from September 11th, 2023 as presented? Councillor Rees, any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. Thank you. And then we have the special council meeting minutes from September 20th, 2023. Any errors or omissions in those minutes? Seeing none, can I get someone to make a motion that council adopt the special council meeting minutes from September 20, 2023 as presented? Councillor Sailer, any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. Thank you. Moving on to business arising from the minutes, agenda item 6.1, the 2023 State of Infrastructure Report. And we have our asset manager, Tim Koba, presenting. So Tim, whenever you're ready, the floor is yours. And we have a mouse for you on the counter there.
Okay, thank you, Mayor and Council, for your time tonight. I'm here on behalf of the Asset Management team to present our second State of the Infrastructure Report to Council. Now, this report was prepared by the Asset Management team, which is a cross-functional team with representation and support from every department in the organization. The purpose of our report today is to provide Council with a high-level overview of the financial state of our assets before Council heads into the 2024 budget season. In tonight's presentation, we'll look at the Town of Coaldale's asset register and answer some key questions about our assets. What do we own? What condition is it in? Estimated current replacement cost and estimated service life. We'll also take a high-level look at our replacement schedule over the next 25 years. We'll go over the infrastructure backlog and look at the key considerations found in the staff report. We'll end with a brief look at our 5-year roadmap, which summarizes our goals and objectives as a team for the next 5 years. This slide is a summary of all of our assets in our asset register. We've updated the list of assets to reflect the approximately 15 million of net capital additions in 2022. And we've added some attributes, or we've added some more details on some of our other assets in here too. The infrastructure report card summary is snapshot in time, and it shows the financial health of our assets. Currently, we're using an age-based condition rating system for most of our asset categories, which is pretty typical for most organizations in kind of a similar stage in asset management. One major change to the register this year was in our road assets. We updated the register to calculate replacement values on asset conditions rather than age. And this just provides a more accurate timeline for replacements. The total replacement value of the town's assets is $336.6 million. The replacement value represents the total amount we would expect to pay if we replaced every single asset in our listing today.
Tim, if I could just interrupt for a second, if you could just
Yes.
back up one slide, please.
Sure.
So you were saying that this particular slide here shows what percentage the shape of the equipment is in. Is that how I understood that? How did you put that?
Okay, so that percentage just says what is the breakdown. So if roads is 93.5 million out of 336.
So what's the 28% for then on the roads?
That 28% just says that of all the assets, 28% belongs to the roads category.
Okay, that's what I was looking for. Thank you.
Yeah. And then the average age that you see here is weighted based on cost. So if you have an expensive asset that has a really long life, that's going to affect your average. Okay, so the total replacement value is $336.6 million, but the total historical cost is only $163.4 million. And that's what was reported in our 2022 financial statements. Many of our assets, you can see, are now reaching the middle of their life, maybe with the exception of Storm. And basically, this would kind of equate to a fair condition rating if we're using an age-based condition rating system. Next slide. This is the 25-year replacement schedule. It shows the infrastructure backlog in the first year. That is $45.5 million. And it is represented, the gray line that you see there is the annualized life cycle cost, and it is $7.6 million. We'll cover the different components in this graph in the next few slides. But this just gives you an idea of the next 25 years. Okay, now this is the infrastructure backlog. The town of Coaldale is running an infrastructure deficit in all 8 of its asset groups. It totals $45.5 million. This is approximately 14% of that total replacement value of $336.6 million. Should be noted, the backlog is a complex number. It needs to be viewed beyond the absolute number. There are many factors that influence the number. Obviously, if you have a piece of equipment and you say it's going to last 10 years, at the end of the 10 years, it's not just going to give up. So that's kind of the idea of the backlog here. The next slide, the 25-year replacement schedule with the backlog removed just gives you a better idea of the changes over the next 25 years. There is a second line added here for the 25-year annualized cost, and that's just to show you that in this 25-year window, the replacement costs are a little bit lower than what you will see beyond 2048. So you can probably expect some bigger spikes as you move on.
So can you give us an example of, pick one of these, how that works in on the 25-year replacement schedule?
Okay, so over the next 25 years, based on an asset and its estimated life, then it gets, well, okay, so if you purchased an asset in 2020 and it has a 15-year life, then you would expect to see it in 2035 here. So this is every asset in our listing, all grouped together by asset class.
Okay, thank you.
So based on our current state, we know we should be reinvesting 7.6 million every year to plan for the replacement of existing infrastructure. This works out to a reinvestment rate of about 2.2%. Didn't change much from last year. And this kind of means that it would take about 45 to 50 years to replace every asset in our current listing. The 25, oh yeah, like I said, we added the 25-year annualized cost line this year. So this is the same report that we had last year, and it's just kind of a benchmark, the closest benchmark we could find to just kind of compare or to look at reinvestment rates, how much are municipalities putting into their existing infrastructure. And the CIRC found that it was about 1%. So 1% of our replacement value, 336, would be 3.36, right? And then the upper target reinvestment rate would be close to, well, just over 2%, which is close to the 7.6 that we were showing in the graphs earlier. Now the recommendation by the Canadian Infrastructure Report Card is to invest approximately a minimum of 1% of your total replacement value every year. And I did a little bit more research into reinvestment rates, and this would include all of your capital reinvestments as well as any funding that you put back into your reserves. So you would count that as your reinvestment rate. And then on the table on the right, you can see that on average, 12% of municipalities' assets are in a very poor or poor condition. And that's kind of comparable to our infrastructure backlog, which was about 14% of our total replacement value. Now this next slide is just for information purposes only. This is just a simple calculation, total replacement value divided by the number of dwelling units in Coaldale. And you can see that average asset ownership per household is just over $100,000. And this chart here just shows the historical investment in infrastructure kind of over the past, based on the age of all the assets in our asset register. This is kind of what it looks like when we put that in a graph. You can see when you look at the 10-year moving average, we're spending about between 4 to 6. I would say between 4 to 6 into capital projects. You can't really calculate a reinvestment rate from this graph, however, because this includes new assets built for growth or new developments, and it's not just for replacing existing assets. And on that note, we're still working on a way to kind of start capturing actual reinvestment rates so that we can report those to council in future versions of this report. Now this is the funding pyramid, the same one that we saw last year. It just shows the different levels of funding, and it tells you how sustainable your organization is based on how much you're funding for replacements. Again, 1 to 2% is probably in the middle of the pyramid here. And then at the very top, you're covering all your growth requirements in addition to making sure that you're staying on top of your aging infrastructure. And this is our 5-year roadmap. No major changes to this. This is based on the FCM Asset Management Readiness Scale. It's the same scale that we use for applying for asset management grants. And then currently, we are working on developing a service level register for the town of Coaldale. And we're working on re-implementing the service request module so that we can start tracking resident requests for service or complaints and just being able to find out what residents are concerned about and yes, we'll be reporting on that as well. But that is the end of the presentation. Thank you for your time, and I'll be happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you, Tim. I can tell you're very passionate on this subject. Like that's a ton of information you've compiled there. So one question I got for you then, when did the town of Coaldale officially start doing asset management to the degree that you're doing it right now?
From my understanding, it was kind of started before I started at the town in 2018. So there was a push for asset management. We had applied for some grants and started with work modules, TCA in automated TCA in our financial system. And then it was probably in 2020 or 2021 that I took on the role as asset manager. And then so ever since kind of took on that role, we've been meeting every 2 weeks.
And it's safe to say that most municipalities do this now?
Well,
hopefully.
Hopefully,
yes.
Yeah.
And then one other question before I open up to council. At the beginning, you were explaining how much we should be putting away every year towards the replacement schedule. So can you or our CFO explain where that is in the budget?
Sure. Yes, please.
Okay, I'm going to use a sporting reference to kind of answer that question. So the numbers Tim proposed, the $7 million a year, does seem quite daunting. I think right now, just reserves alone, that excludes our capital grants, we're say $3 million. When you start adding capital grants, we're around $4.5–5 million. So we're not there yet. It's not enough, but we're slowly getting there. Think of it as if your favorite team gets blown out one day. You're not going to win the Super Bowl tomorrow. You can only think about next week, slowly getting better next week. And that's the method we've been taking the last couple of years, is getting somewhat better every year to ultimately hit that goal. We're not going to hit the $7 million next year, but through the next couple of years of some hard work, we can slowly get there, maybe 5–10 years.
Thank you. So then is it fair to say when we're doing budget deliberations and we're looking at dipping into our reserves to help offset residential and non-residential tax increases, it comes back to bite us in the end because we're taking money away from this?
Yeah, it becomes a discussion of using your funds now and saving for today versus kind of putting the issue off for tomorrow. One of my mentors always told me, when you're using the money you have in the bank to kind of supplement your operating budgets for next year, it's like selling your house to pay for groceries. You're taking your long-term assets to pay for funds today, which does help alleviate some pain today, but down the road, you may see that come to bite you back in the butt.
Okay, thank you. I'll open it up to members of council. Are there any questions, comments for either Tim or our CFO? Councillor Chapman.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor, and thank you to Tim and Kyle for your presentation, particularly Tim for keeping the pulse on this and showing council the direction that we should be taking. My question is with regards to something you said earlier, and could you just help me again with what you said earlier about the asset management based on cost rather than life cycle or something to that effect? What was the, just rephrase that again.
I may have been referring to using age-based for a condition rather than age-based condition rather than any other kind of condition-based. That just means that for a lot of our assets, say for example water, we can't really tell the condition of the pipes in the ground, but what we can do is look at when was that put into the ground, and then from there we can kind of make an estimation of service life and when replacements will need to be done.
So that brings up a good point, because I think what we're learning too with new materials and that especially with underground pipes and that maybe the life cycle of some of that infrastructure might be longer than what is planned for. So if something is being planned for 75 years, maybe it might be longer, but who knows? It hasn't been tested yet. So we need to really be disciplined about preparing for maybe even a shorter period of time, just in case, so that we can replace items incrementally instead of at a full, replacement. So my other comment would be with regards to different types of assets. So, for example, we can reserve and budget and plan for replacement of tractors and trucks and half tons and items that certainly have a shorter life cycle, but it's much more difficult for us to plan for replacement of items such as buildings. And like our hockey arena is now 50 years old. So we can use that as sort of a benchmark to say that, technically speaking, that building would have served its life cycle on age, yet it's still very structurally sound. And yet, on the other hand, we're into our fourth town office, and yet those buildings are still around the community. So just be curious as to how you would futuristically plan for such asset replacements.
Thank you for the question, Councillor Chapman. And yes, those are very good comments. And that is one thing that we do is we go through that listing and we look for anything that may have changed from the year before. We always try and be reasonable, because there are a lot of assumptions in something like this. And but we try and make sure that we look through and see if anything needs to be adjusted based on changes during the year. Yeah.
Thank you.
Just to add to your question, one of the things when we're presenting budgets and we're having these conversations about what we should be investing in, whatnot, with the infrastructure deficit, we're not going to have enough funds to fully commit to investing to rebuild our assets when they sometimes fall apart. A good example practically is the pool, right? So like there is the discussion of what to do next with the pool. How come we haven't been saving enough to fully fund and replace the pool? That ultimately goes to that there are different priorities and different levels of critical infrastructure that need more immediate funding. So buildings often we don't necessarily plan to fully replace them, but we do plan to fix them as they fall apart, so we can get the maximum life out of the building. So if you spend X amount of dollars for a building that's supposed to last $50 million, we may not be able to fully fund the replacement of the building in 50 years. But through this proper asset management and managing our infrastructure, we may be able to have that building last 75 years, which gives us another 25 years to future fund it. Further examples are, inflation as it does go up, we do have the advantage of technology. There's better ways to replace and manage our assets as part of that. One example is the sewer relining program. Instead of having to dig up road and replace the sewer lines every time, the ops team now has the technology to go in there and just reline the sewers, right? So we're not having to actually replace all the pipe, which you can now do for a fraction of the cost. So those are good examples to kind of go with that.
Thank you. Just in one final question, our Civic Square, is it already online in terms of as an asset that you manage? I guess put it that way. And the rec facility, when will it come on stream?
So Civic Square is not in our asset register quite yet. That's something that will be added to our TCA listing in 2023. So that's when our asset register will be updated.
And
Same with the rec center. Yeah. Yeah. So everything we've paid for those two has not been reflected in this asset register yet.
Okay, thank you. Any further questions, comments? Seeing none, could I get someone to make a motion that council accept the 2023 asset management report as information? Councillor Chapman, any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. Once again, good job, Tim. Thank you. Moving on to agenda item 6.2. We have our 2023 Community Satisfaction Survey results, and we have our Manager of Government Relations, Jonathan Wensveen, presenting. So, John, whenever you're ready, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mayor, Council. So the purpose of this staff report is to present Council with the results of the town's 2023 Community Satisfaction Survey. A little bit of background: during the July 11th, 2022 regular Council meeting, Council approved a Council communication strategy that directs administration to begin conducting an annual Community Satisfaction Survey, which may serve as a useful planning tool for both Council and administration, providing ample opportunity to ask questions about town services, facilities, and finances. And so on June 1st, 2023, administration launched the town's 2023 Community Satisfaction Survey. The survey was made available in both digital and hard copy formats for a period of 2 months until July 31st, 2023. The digital format was made available via the town's public engagement platform, Let's Connect Coaldale, and was promoted on both the homepage of the town's website and on the town's social media platforms. The hard copy format was made available for pickup at the town office, the senior center, and the Sunny South Lodge. When the survey went live, the town issued a press release to advertise its availability via the Sunny South News and in the June edition of the town's monthly newsletter. In total, there were 74 responses, 69 were digital and 5 were paper. 4 of those were from non-residents, so they were filtered out of the results, leaving 70 valid responses. Just to contextualize the survey's results and provide some information on how to interpret them, I wrote a little bit about survey accuracy. To achieve a 95% confidence level with a plus or minus 5% margin of error, which is standard for quantitative research conducted in the social sciences, would have required random sampling. This is standard practice for most polling firms, which choose respondents randomly so as to eliminate bias. Sometimes, if it's not random sampled, you just get a large cohort of people who may, have a lot in common and therefore sway the results of a survey. And then for Coaldale, we would also need a sample size of at least 363 responses based on an estimate of 6,571 residents who are of voting age. So that the sample was neither random nor 363 responses in size means that although the findings are informative, the opinions expressed in the survey should not be mistaken for opinions held by town residents in general. In other words, 95% of the time. As far as advertising went, the survey was advertised via the town's social media platforms on the following dates: June 1st, June 27th, July 7th, July 12th, July 21st, July 26th, and July 31st. It was also advertised on the town's homepage for the entire 2 months. And then again, an article appeared in the Sunny South News. With that, I'll turn it over to council for any questions about the findings. I'm happy to get into any of them, should there be questions regarding any in particular.
Thank you, John, for your presentation. I'll open up to council. Are there any questions, comments? Councillor Reese.
Thanks, Mayor Van Rijn. Through to Jonathan. Thank you and your team for the hard work put into making this survey and your due diligence in getting this together for us to review. I just have a couple of thoughts, and that is because there's only 70 respondents out of a population of 9,500, roughly. It's tough to really take it at face value what the results of this survey are, as you rightfully said. So I was just wondering if going forward, if there's a better way somehow of getting the word out for people, our residents, to take this. Like, I know that it was advertised on the town's social media platforms all that time, but should we have it pinned at the top of the Facebook page? It was mailed out once in the June utilities bill. Should that be something that's done each month that this is taking place? It was only 2 months, but maybe even leading up to it. Like, we need to maybe find some other avenues to get more people involved and doing these surveys. Otherwise, we're never going to know what the true thoughts of our residents are.
Through to Councillor Reese. Yeah, I totally agree. I think that we need to rethink how to promote it a little bit. For Council's information, it was pinned to the top of our Facebook page for the entire 2 months. But nevertheless, it would be nice to increase the numbers to a point where we could, have some reliable data that can guide council moving forward. So,
Thank you.
Councillor Chapman.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you to John for your diligence on this. And like Councillor Reese has mentioned, your work has certainly paid off in many different ways. And just as a follow-up to Councillor Reese's questions, I think I'm just wondering if on the other side of the page that you could take each of those responses, whether positively or negatively, in the same token that you would receive a praise or a complaint from a member of the public, whether, like, if they registered one online with the town office upstairs or online, whether you could use each one of those to a degree that they are referencing whatever it is, the issues. And I see and hear that there's some praises, but also some concerns too with regards to I saw that in my view the issues of bylaw enforcement as one of the things that popped up fairly frequently.
Yeah, I think the idea of cross-referencing the results of future surveys with whatever data is collected by corporate services through the complaint system would be a really good way to kind of have another measure of how people feel the town is being run. So I definitely think that could be a useful exercise moving forward.
Thank you. Any further questions, comments? So perhaps we can add this as a agenda item for our strat planning, and then we can kick around some ideas that we can discuss further. If there's no more questions for our presenter, could I get someone to make a motion that council accept the 2023 Community Satisfaction Survey results as information? Councillor Reese, any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. Thank you. Moving on to agenda item 6.3, we have the Town of Coaldale Recreation Advisory Committee terms of reference, and we have our Director of Recreation and Community Services, Russ Tanner, presenting. Russ, whenever you're ready, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. As you're aware, the IDEA General Committee was suggested at the September 11, 2023 regular council meeting. During that meeting, Town Council preference was to develop a committee that would meet quarterly and provide additional support to focus groups, local clubs, and participate in community engagement initiatives. Town Council requested administration to come back with the draft terms of reference. And so in front of you is the draft terms of reference, of which I'll take us through a little bit of step by step. So the purpose of the committee: the Recreation Advisory Committee should make every effort to collectively represent the recreation interests within the town of Coaldale. to advise Coaldale Town Council on various recreation issues, including fees, charges, programming, and long-term planning-based community needs. To bring forward recommendations to Coaldale Town Council regarding the repair, maintenance, and improvements to town parks and recreation facilities, and to provide an avenue of community support or community sport, recreation groups, and citizens to discuss and put forward their ideas and concerns with respect to recreation services, programs, and facilities. In the draft terms of reference, the committee would be made up of the following. The town of Coaldale shall appoint one member town council. The county of Lethbridge should appoint one member who may or may not be a county councillor. The Palliser School Division shall appoint one representative. The Holy Spirit Catholic School Division shall appoint one representative. The Coaldale Christian School shall appoint one representative. The Family and Community Support Services, known as FCSS of Coaldale, shall appoint one representative. The Coaldale Chamber of Commerce shall present one representative. And final but not least, the appointment of 4 members at large to round out an 11-member voting committee. The terms of office, the town councillor, county, so organization representatives to encompass them all. Terms of office would commence on the day of their appointment and end on the day of the next organizational meeting, wherein they would make the change and update the appointment according to their own processes and or bylaws. The members at large, the 4 positions that would be advertised for, would be a 3-year term with a maximum of 4 terms, being a total of 12 years. They must apply to be appointed. Upon completion of the term, the position shall be advertised. A member who has held the position shall be eligible to reapply for another term. Any member of the committee may resign upon sending notice in writing to the town of Coaldale, and should a term become vacant, the vacancy will be advertised. A member at large of the committee will be disqualified to serve on the committee if the following occurs: cease to be a resident of Coaldale, or in the case of the county of Lethbridge representative, if they cease to be a resident of the county, are absent for more than 2 meetings in the past year of the committees, unless absence are authorized by the town, upon sending written notice to the town of Coaldale. So, and then the last section in the draft terms of reference really is the conduct of meetings. And the committee itself would elect a chairman, vice chairman, and secretary. The committee should hold no less than 4 meetings within a year. Special meetings may be called by the chairman wherever it is considered expedient to do so. And when requested, when requested in writing by a majority of the committee members. Verbal or written notice shall be given to the committee and members no less than 24 hours prior to the meeting. And a quorum will be the majority of the appointed members. Motions do not require a seconder, cannot be made by the chairman, and or passed by a simple majority. Simple majority. All members including the chairman, shall vote on all questions. In the event of a tie, the motion shall be lost. Agendas are to be prepared by town administration and circulated in advance of the meeting. And the secretary shall record in writing the minutes of all regular special meetings, including the record of attendance. Copies of all minutes shall be forwarded to the committee's members ahead of each new meeting. The secretary shall forward in writing all recommendations to the town of Coaldale for consideration, and town administration may attend the committee meetings in an advisory capacity and may serve as secretary. I should have probably, ahead of going through the terms of reference, made council aware that these just weren't pulled out of the air. What we did is we looked at a number of other advisory committees, rec boards, things like that, and kind of looked at what the majority were doing, and also took into account the conversation we had on September 11th and your recommendations. All right. So, as I see it, there are two options. The council approved the draft terms of reference for the Town of Coaldale Recreation Advisory Committee and appoint one member of Town Council to the committee. For the Town Council, direct administration to contact the stakeholders outlined in the membership section of the terms of reference and request their participation, as well as begin the application process for the 4 members at large. Or option 2, the council provide additional direction as they see fit concerning the terms of reference and the process moving forward. I'll turn the time over to you.
Thank you, Russ. I'll open up for questions. We have Councillor Avery. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor Van Rijn. So just one question on the membership. How was this derived, and specifically FCSS, one representative? So they're a nonprofit organization that does run in our community, but why would they get a membership and not other nonprofit? And then the second, I personally would like to see 2 town councillors on the committee. And then back to FCSS, if they wanted to have one of their board members and or employees on, why could they not use one of those spots for residents to fill those spots? Because if it's our council appointee that sits on FCSS, that would be fine. But if they're going to take their council appointee from Milk River to sit on Coaldale's rec board, I do have a little bit of an issue with a makeup like that, because this is for Coaldale and Lethbridge County, this committee.
Yeah, through to Councillor Avery. That's a good question. The makeup of these committees oftentimes are within the fabric of a community, trying to identify people that are stakeholders within the conversations and discussions and programs that may be offered within a community and its resources. And so not every community has a social service like which FCSS is directly involved with as well, sit on them. However, some do. And we often find ourselves working with and programming with and supporting FCSS. So it is showing up here as an option, but certainly up to council's discretion.
Councillor Chapman has a question. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor, and through to Russ. I do have a few points, if that's okay, Mayor. One being speaking in support of option number 1, and nonetheless, I want to just mention about the component of the and the purpose of the committee. So I just want to ensure that even though you're meeting quarterly, which is I agree with completely, but that it may be just an effort to understand the direction of the committee, so they're not putting more work on administration than you have capacity to handle. So whether they come up with recommendations for fees and for some of the other things, that might be a good thing for them to understand what's going on, but to develop positions on items that we may not have the capacity to take forward, and even though they would have to come to council for approval, just so that there's a balance on the committee that reflects the best interests of the community, but it's not putting more impact on rec services than what's already there. So that's just one thought. The second point I would like to make, and speaking in understanding of Councillor Avery's position on FCSS, I appreciate the fact that you've encouraged FCSS to be there, and it's obvious from our board of FCSS that we have a number of board members, but particularly employees who we could that live here in Coaldale that could be assigned to sit on the committee if the board so chooses to go that route. The third thing I want to mention to you is on your category for applications Coaldale residents from at large, I would like to ask you to recommend that we place a senior as well into that category or into a category. So our seniors in Coaldale are very important. They serve various aspects of recreation in the community, both internally and externally. So I would recommend that you appoint them. And the final one is, being that this committee is a committee of the town, even though you may elect a chair and a vice chair, I would recommend that the secretary be a recording secretary, either appointed by the town rec services department, just sort of to keep consistency with some of the other town committee appointments that are made in the town.
Okay, I appreciate those comments. And I don't foresee there being an issue with any of those suggestions. I guess what I would suggest is, from what I'm hearing, if I understand it correctly, that one member of the residents at large, to ensure that at least one of those 4 positions is a senior position. And then also to, rather than have the committee appoint a secretary from the body of the committee appointees, to actually have a recording secretary and have that be administration and a town employee administrator.
That would be my recommendation, and then those minutes would certainly be a responsibility or even ownership of the town, which could be circulated through the town minutes or however you'd like to have those minutes circulated.
Thank you, Councillor Chapman. I agree on your recommendations. I like the idea of it being a staff member for consistency with the minutes. Any other questions? Deputy Mayor Beekman.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Russ. After thinking about this for a little bit and then reading the staff report, I'll just ask you, as you're the expert in this field. Are we creating another level of bureaucracy, or do you see this being beneficial to the committees that already exist?
Through to Councillor Beekman. It's a really good question. I think we discussed it a little bit, but Kalen and I have discussed it as well. I like the suggestion of quarterly meeting for this committee. I also like the suggestion, it wasn't lost in Councillor Chapman, what he was suggesting is that the committee make sure that, you know, what their roles and responsibilities are. I do believe that this committee could be a support to the existing focused groups, and it can be a support to administration in a way that administration does a number of research, whether it be researching, you know, what the rates and fees are, and doing a comprehensive survey of what rates and fees are around us, and with those that not so much we compete with, but our peers within the industry. A prime example of that would be the rates and fees and the booking allocation process. They vary slightly within community, but the biggest thing is what are people paying to access their facilities. It's nice to have a generalized committee like this to be able to come and see administration's work and make a recommendation to council, and the community to see that a group that's looking at it from a number of different angles, not just from one user group angle, has the ability to take a step back and suggest that they like what they hear, and the recommendation of administration falls within the parameters that they would suggest they support. So that can provide another layer of advisory to town council that you might view similar to public engagement, right? But from people that do have a stake in it and are stakeholders. So that area, and then as things move forward on the development and the design of facilities, what's included in a facility, lease agreements, things like that, they can take an opportunity to they don't make decisions, but they can certainly recommend that what they're seeing they support, or that what they'd like to see additional information on it, on things. Oftentimes in a community, when you start to see change, and we're going to see some change here as we grow, we put in a new facility. You're going to see some change. You're also going to see some change with some of the most recent research that we've done with rates and fees. That when somebody from a local club is singularly looking at the issue only from their perspective, they're going to have a hard time seeing the reasons why possibly administration is making the recommendations they make, and they'll want to come straight to council. This gives council an opportunity, if you so choose, to say to them to go to this committee, and so that this committee can hear their concerns or questions, and also make a recommendation, and it maybe takes a little bit of pressure both off of administration and council in that circumstance.
Councillor Reese had a question.
Thank you, Mayor Van Rijn, through to Russ. So under the umbrella of this committee would obviously fall the focus groups and the local boards or whatever, sort of local clubs. And I guess my concern is just, is this going to provide any more red tape or any more hoops to jump through, so to speak, having a committee overseeing these focus groups?
So through the chair to Councillor Reese, yes, it's a good question. The importance here is I don't think that anywhere in these terms of reference it suggests that this committee oversees the focus groups, but that it's an additional resource to the focus groups. Our expectation isn't that those focus groups would require to come back to the rec committee. However, this committee would have the ability to, sit in on those focus groups. Those focus groups would have the ability to have them as a resource where recommendations are being made to council. That would be where they'd come and look for support of a generalized rec committee. But reporting directly back on an ongoing basis structurally isn't something that I foresee happening. And then really, because this is an advisory committee, I don't believe it's creating red tape. I believe it's creating exactly that, just an opportunity for additional advice.
Okay. And also, my other question is, does this still kind of stay on par with keeping our small town feel? I kind of feel like a generalized committee is almost running away from us with all these members on there. I'm just concerned that it's becoming less localized and more, I don't know, too much outsider input maybe. And I don't mean that in a disrespectful way at all. I'm just concerned about that small town feel. So can you just explain that a bit better?
Yeah, you bet. And maybe I can, answer even the previous question within this question a little better than what I did. What I can tell you is when we did the research to see who has these generalized advisory committees, the majority of towns around McGrath, Raymond, Cardston, Pitcher Butte, Tabor, they do have these committees, even smaller towns than ours. And to answer the previous question maybe a little better is what this generalized group, when structured in a way that has stakeholders coming to the table and hearing these, that's something we don't have right now. And don't get me wrong, because the focus groups have done a really amazing job on their passion and specific for each one of their facilities that they've been building or their programs that they're establishing. However, if they run into a situation where more budget is needed, or there are decisions being made that are split down the middle, and it's a difficult situation, and council would like additional advice, this is an opportunity for people to come together and look at it with stakeholders that may have a stake in the very issue, and them being able to provide that feedback formally rather than informally.
Okay, and then finally, my last question then, because you just kind of sparked a thought for me, is where stakeholders are concerned, where anything is concerned for Northwest Coaldale, especially closer to the wetland area. I mean, Colin is a big stakeholder over there. Will we find a way to ensure that he's included in some of these discussions in any type of rec thing going over there, like a new pool or a skating rink or anything like that in that wetland area?
So good question. And so this provides an opportunity for the birds of prey to be able to come and make their concern known to a committee that now has with it, Palliser School Division, has with it, other service groups within the community, the county of Lethbridge. So it provides another avenue for him to be heard, is what I would suggest. It's difficult to start to include every not-for-profit group, and that speaks back to Councillor Avery's comment about FCSS. But I guess the president has been set in other communities with an FCSS representative where they suggest that because it's community programs being offered that are very similar in nature, oftentimes than a community services group, that they've included them. We don't need to. There's already been suggestions of, the recording secretary being in administration, making sure that one of the citizens at large positions is a senior. We can certainly circle back and talk about FCSS, but it provides an opportunity for those groups, which there will be multiple groups: minor hockey, figure skating, ball association, adult hockey leagues. All these groups now have an opportunity to come to a generalized board and to make their concerns known or give suggestions about what maybe some money with the Friends of the Arena is spent on and things like that. And then that board has an opportunity to present to council their case and recommendation, and then council really just has an opportunity to make a decision that they feel fit. So,
Okay, thank you.
you bet.
Thank you for the questions, Council. Great discussion. There's lots of questions that came out of this discussion. So my recommendation is if I could get someone to make a motion to table this discussion, and we'll bring it up as another agenda item at our strat planning, and then we can iron out some of these. Okay. Councillor Pickering makes a motion to table the Town of Coaldale Recreation Advisory Committee terms of reference until we have an opportunity to discuss further at strat planning. Any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. Thank you. Thanks, Russ. Oh, and Russ, before you leave, just one comment I was going to make, or a question I should say. When you refer to a simple majority, like if we're going to have 11 or 12 members, like if 3 or 4 people only show up to the meeting, you're still going to continue with the meeting and make business decisions?
They can continue with the meeting, but they cannot make a motion and pass a motion. They would require 6 as the majority.
Okay, thank you. Okay, moving on to new business. We have our Manager of Government Relations, Jonathan Wensveen, talking about the Village of Stirling, Alberta Community Partnership grant application. So John, whenever you're ready, floor is yours.
Thank you, Mayor, Council. The purpose of this staff report is to seek a motion from Council supporting the Village of Stirling's proposed application to the Alberta Community Partnership Intermunicipal Collaboration application. To just some background, to determine how best to serve residents' needs and reduce social stigma surrounding support services within the Barons Eureka Warner region, the Village of Stirling has proposed to submit an Alberta Community Partnership application to conduct a community needs assessment. The project will focus on the root causes of social challenges related to the province's priorities and determine strategies to proactively address these challenges. And so on September 6, 2023, the Barons Eureka Warner FCSS board endorsed this proposal with a motion. And now that this motion has been carried, the FCSS, Barons Eureka Warner FCSS, is asking that each of its member municipalities show support for this proposal by having their respective councils make a motion to support this application as well. And so with that, I'll leave it to council for any questions.
Thank you. I'll open it up to council for any questions, comments. Councillor Avery.
Thank you, Mayor. First question is what's the dollar amount they're applying for? Is it the full $200,000? And then as a follow-up to that is, what is the base of the grant? Reduce social stigma. So is that in Coaldale? Is that in Barrens? Is that in the whole region? Like to me, the motion is great, but what's the dollar amount and where's it going to? Is it for contract work? Is it for the existing workers to develop the plan? I'm not 100% sure.
Yeah. Through to Councillor Avery, it's a good question. I believe the amount is for the 200,000 for the full amount, and as for the scope of what is being considered, I think it's, from what I understand, a needs assessment for the entire region. So in all of the municipalities that are currently belong to the Barrens Eureka Warner FCSS, but we can definitely look into more information about it for council should council want to table this motion.
Councillor Chapman.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, John, and to respond to Councillor Avery as well, that yes, it is for $200,000. The municipality that is sponsoring the ACP grant is the Village of Stirling, and so it's applicable to the whole region of the FCSS. What they're asking for is a letter of support, and that's what the town of Coaldale would be supporting this application with. So we're expecting to have all 16 member municipalities support this application with letters, and that was the intent from the board of the SSS. So I'd be happy to make the motion to proceed as proposed here.
Councillor Avery, does that answer your questions? Any further questions? There's a motion on the floor by Councillor Chapman that council approve participating with the Village of Stirling and applying for an Alberta Community Partnership Intermunicipal Collaboration Funding Grant to fund the Barrens Eureka Warner FCSS Community Needs Assessment Project. Any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. Thank you. Moving on to agenda item 8. Where did I lost my place here? 8.2, the Town of Coaldale Alberta Community Grant application. Again, Jonathan Wensveen, our Manager of Government Relations, is presenting. Go ahead, John.
Thank you, Mayor, Council. The purpose of this report is to request that Council pass a resolution establishing Coaldale as the managing partner for a $200,000 funding application under the Alberta Community Partnership Program. This study will examine regional potable water solutions along the Highway 3 corridor. There's no matching contribution required. This project is taking place in collaboration with the counties and municipalities situated along the Highway 3 corridor, led by Tabor Warner MLA and Parliamentary Secretary for Agri-Food Development, Grant Hunter. The scoping letter provided by Mr. Hunter's office is attached to this report. And just as an update, I've also attached a letter received today in support of this initiative from Premier Daniel Smith, along with 4 other MLAs in the region. So with that, I'll turn it back over to Council.
Thank you, John. Open it up to council. Any questions, comments? So this particular application will be covering a study that's going to be for the corridor, like John mentioned, between Lethbridge and Medicine Hat. And that includes Lethbridge, Medicine Hat, Lethbridge County, Coaldale, Tabor, MD of Tabor, Barnwell, County of 40 Mile, Bow Island, and Cypress County. And we'll be receiving letters of support from each one of those municipalities as well for this initiative. So if there is no further questions, comments, I'm looking for someone to make a motion that council support the town of Coaldale submission of a 2023-24 Alberta Community Partnership Grant application in support of the Regional Water Concept Development Study Project and direct administration to manage the grant project and related compliance requirements for which no matching contribution is required. Any further discussion? Deputy Mayor Beekman is going to make that motion. I'll call the question. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. Thank you. And moving on to agenda item 8.3. Again, we have Jonathan presenting on the Town of Tabor Alberta Community Partnership Grant application. Go ahead, John.
Thank you, Mayor, Council. The purpose of this report is to request that Council pass the following resolution in support of the Town of Tabor's application for $200,000 in funding from the Alberta Community Partnership Program for the purpose of studying wastewater servicing options along the Highway 3 corridor. This project is taking place in collaboration with the counties and municipalities situated along the Highway 3 corridor, led by Tabor Warner MLA and Parliamentary Secretary for Agri-Food Development, Grant Hunter. Again, the scoping letter is attached to the staff report, and this request represents the wastewater side of the coin for this project. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Any questions for Jonathan on this one? Then I'm looking for someone to sponsor a motion that council support the Town of Tabor's managing partner submission of a 2023-2024 Alberta Community Partnership Grant application in support of the Regional Wastewater Concept Development Study Project for which no matching contribution is required. Councillor Pickering makes that motion. Any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. Thank you. And that takes us down to the addition to the agenda that I mentioned earlier under information items, agenda item 12.1, a unified letter of support from regional MLAs regarding the Coaldale Tabor ACP grant application that we just spoke on. And I'm just going to open that up to our CAO, Kalen Hastings, to maybe speak to that, please.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll just highlight a few excerpts from the letter, which is hot off the press here. We did receive this earlier this afternoon, and it ties directly into the ACP grant applications that Jonathan just presented on, one being the potable water study along the Highway 3 corridor for Coaldale, and then the wastewater study being conducted by the Town of Tabor along the Highway 3 corridor. So a couple of paragraphs on the letter here that are germane to our projects. To the mayors and reeves located on the Agri-Food corridor between Lethbridge and Medicine Hat, first off, we want to thank you for your tireless advocacy on behalf of your respective communities. It is such a great honor to work with you as MLAs to build on a world-class Agri-Food corridor in southern Alberta. In order to understand the wastewater needs of the corridor, we have asked the Town of Tabor to apply for an ACP grant that will be used to study our corridor's wastewater needs. In order to understand the water needs of the corridor, we have asked the Town of Coaldale to apply for an ACP grant that will be used to study our corridor's water needs. As MLAs representing the corridor, we wish to express our 100% solidarity and support with MLA Grant Hunter in his work to get this past the finish line. This is probably the best letter of support I've ever seen for an ACP grant, so we will be submitting this along with our applications later this week.
Sorry. Are there any questions, comments for our CAO? Okay, seeing, oh, go ahead, Councillor Chapman.
Yeah, speaking, thank you, Mayor. I'm speaking in favor of this, and I'd like to make a motion that we receive this for information. And just a question through to our CAO, should we supply a letter of response of thank you on this, or is this suffice?
I think it's sufficient to just receive for information. Our action items stemming from this application will be our roundabout thank you.
Okay.
So that's a motion by Councillor Chapman to receive the letter for information. Any further discussion? See none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. Thank you. So that concludes the open portion of the meeting. And I need a motion to go into closed session at 6:10 p.m. Can I get someone to make that motion? Councillor Sailer. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. Thank you. We'll take a 10-minute break.